A few hours into the session, we pick up pocket Jiggities in the hijack. I'm going to tell you the best story that I have about this hand. The first time that I met Ivey, which was a couple months ago, I asked him to do a joke for the vlog with me about Jiggities. He says, "Jiggities? What the hell is that? Sounds like some kind of racist shit. I bet they're blackjacks too." I'm confused and completely caught off guard. I just offended my favorite poker player on the planet, and my immediate reaction is to say, "What? No." He sees that I'm distraught, starts smiling at me, and says, "I'm just fucking with you, dude." He said that doing comedy bits isn't really his thing, but he agreed to do an interview with me that I put on a previous episode. Anyway, back to the hand. The player on my right opens a 60 from middle position. His name's Kenny. I can reasonably call or 3-bet. I 3-bet to 200. Let's play a big pot in position. Hold on, it's about to get bigger than I anticipated. The opponent 4-bets to 760. Not exactly what I wanted to see. 560 is quite a bit more to call. I almost clawed my way back to even. I don't want to lose a big pot and get stuck piles again. Folding just seems too weak. I call to set mine, or, have the board come with 3 overs. Either one would be totally fine, really. We're heads up in a massive 4-bet pot in a high-stakes game. If you've enjoyed this video so far, hit the like button on the count of 3 for some extra run good. We're gonna need it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. The flop is Ace-Jack 4 Rainbow. It's the 3rd time we flopped a set or better. Let's be up against Ace-King one time. The opponent down bets to 500. I'm in another situation where I'm extremely strong, and I don't want to scare off worse hands. That's a good problem to have. This is when another guy at the table named Dylan starts filming, so I've synced both angles. By the way, everyone who was in this game gave me their permission to be filmed. People were all super friendly, and we talked about YouTube and a variety of other things quite a bit. Let's hear Dylan's play-by-play.
Kenny bets 500. Spread right there. He's going for the call. Okay, finish the turn. Action turn. Action turn. Action's on Kenny. Kenny checks with his amazing fingers.
Once Kenny checks with his amazing fingers, I'm in a very interesting spot. There's a small chance that he'll have aces and I'm crushed. He hopefully has ace-king or ace-5 suited, although he probably would have bet again with ace-5, since that's good for 2-pair and is somewhat vulnerable. There's also a strong possibility that he has kings or queens and won't love this board. I'm again trying to determine how to make the most money and ideally get my entire stack in. I don't want to bet much here so that I can keep as many 1-pair hands in as possible, or perhaps give my opponent some rope if he wants to turn whatever hand he has into a bluff. I bet 800. If the player calls, then I'll be set up perfectly to jam river for about 2/3 the size of the pot. Unfortunately, the opponent is at the bottom of his range with what he'd tell me later is pocket queens, and he has to fold.
He throws it in the muck. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely fucking brilliant. For the fucking vlog. Look at that. Are you kidding? Fucking set in a 4-bet pot? What is that? It doesn't get any better than that. That's why he's Bradoing.
I add on for 1,400 more. I get no mental breaks. Just 2 hands later, I pick up pocket Jiggities on the button. I genuinely didn't love this hand several years ago, but since I started making jokes about it, I feel like I've run really well when I pick it up. Anyway, a player in middle position opens at 30. The high Jiggity calls. I'm not going to flat. I 3-bet to 120. The initial preflop raiser puts in the 4-bet to 330. I could be crushed if he has aces, kings, or queens. I might be a slight favorite if he has a hand like ace-king. The hijack folds. I'm getting a decent price with huge implied odds. I'm not a big fan of playing another giant pot immediately after doubling someone up. I'm not folding though. I call. We're about to go heads up in a big 4-bet pot in position. This is where I need your help. If you'd like the dealer to put out a 3rd Jiggity, hit that like button on the count of 3. Ready? Let's go. 1, 2, 3. The flop comes 8-7-3 with 3 diamonds. Damn it, it didn't work. The good news is that we still have an overpair and we have the jack-high flush draw. We get even better news as the opponent checks. I don't think he'd do that with kings or queens with a diamond. Maybe he'd do it with ace-king of diamonds or aces with the ace of diamonds as a trap. A lot of the time, he won't have any diamond in his hand and we'll be ahead by a wide margin, or at least we'll be in decent shape. I want to deny equity from ace-king hands, particularly ones containing 1 diamond. I bet 400. The opponent is thinking about what he wants to do. My sense is that he genuinely isn't sure what action to take. Ultimately, he slides in a stack of black chips that has me covered. I double check to make sure that I have the jack of diamonds. Another interesting thing about my situation is that I went slightly north when I added on for 1,400. I started the hand with about 1,565, which is slightly more than the $1,500 max. Technically, 65 of those chips shouldn't be in play. If I call and lose, I won't say anything and I'll give my entire stack to the opponent. If I call and win, I'll make sure that the opponent doesn't have to pay me extra. For the sake of the amount that I'm considering calling, we'll assume that I'd be drawing near dead because that's how I tend to do things, and it'll be $8.35 for me to continue on. I'm not at all in the folding mood. I might lose $3,000 in a stretch of 3 hands. Buckle your seats, I'm calling.
All right.
I have no idea what the situation is. This could just be a quick session in which I get torched. The turn is the 7 of spades, it shouldn't change anything. The river is the jack of clubs. We backdoor a full house and have the second nuts in a huge pot. You guys smashing the like button earlier obviously helped bring the run good, but it just took a little time to reach Bellagio. I'm almost 100% sure that we have the best hand, so I'm not going to slow roll, although the opponent is supposed to show his cards first since I called his shove. The other players at the table are shocked to see what we have and the run out.
Oh, Jiggity.
The opponent voluntarily reveals that we got extremely lucky.
Aces, Jesus. All right, it should just be 1,500. I might have been a little bit more, but I shouldn't be allowed to.
Yeah, it should be 15.
Thanks, Huck.
I make sure that the opponent doesn't pay me more than he has to. I'm in shock after losing a pretty brutal hand, and then immediately getting about as lucky as possible against pocket aces with the ace of diamonds. I told you the Jiggities have been good to me lately. It's quickly become my favorite hand. Things can change rapidly. With a flip of a card in poker, we go from being stuck piles to actually having a small profit. It's not over either. 15 minutes later, a big pot is brewing again. There's a $100 straddle on. Boston Jimmy has ace-king offsuit on the button. He raises to 400. I'm in the big blind with my favorite hand. I'm going to be 3-betting.
Ooh, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta
There's
be
no right
kidding
way to
me.
play Jiggities, so it doesn't matter what I do.
Amazing, amazing. Boston Jimmy, the ace-king offsuit, raises it up. Brad Owen 3-bets to 1.5 thousand with the pocket jacks.
See some action here.
We definitely are. Now, will Boston Jimmy decide to just smooth call, play a little post flop, or is the price of poker about to go up?
This is a very interesting hand developing. I've got pocket jacks once more against ace-king, but the dynamics are way different this time. This is a button versus big blind scenario in which ranges are going to be much wider. The opponent and I just happen to be at the top of those ranges. Boston Jimmy puts in a huge 4-bet to 5,600, leaving himself with only 3,500 behind. After seeing the 4-bet, I'm not exactly fist pumping. In fact, there's a decent chance that I'm completely smoked. Being up against ace-king is one of the best case scenarios. I only flatted Jesse's 3-bet over my early position raise with jacks. In a big blind versus button hand, I'm 5-bet jamming. Boston Jimmy makes the snap call. I'm not excited to see that. The button asks if I want to run it once or twice. Twice isn't very fun, so I say, let's go once.
Brad has declared running it once. Wow. Wow. Brad's either going to get the early double here, roughly a double, or get stacked right out of the gate. Here we go.
It's an $18,000 pot, and the flop comes Queen 8-3 with 2 hearts. We fade the ace and king on the flop. The opponent has some backdoor draws, though. The turn is the deuce of diamonds, immediately putting an end to the button's backdoor chances. All we need to do to win a massive pot starting out is to avoid an ace or king one more time. The river is the 8 of spades. Running it once pays off. We win an enormous pot shortly into the stream. For a hand that there's no right way to play, we're playing Jiggities quite well. This one feels good, especially given how the week was going for me up to this point. I'm at the top of the leaderboard. That hasn't been the case very often for me on the Lodge streams. Minutes later, it's our turn with the Jiggities. We're on the button. A player in middle position raises to 15. The cutoff calls. We're going to take a similar approach as we did in the previous hand with a 3-bet to 60. The initial raise is smaller, there's one less opponent, and we're in position, which is why our 3-bet sizing here is only half the amount that we 3-bet with queens. The middle position player calls for 45 more. The cutoff folds. It's down to heads up. The flop is much better for Jiggities. It comes Jack, Jack, 6 rainbow. We flop quads in a 3-bet pot. What happens next is almost as unbelievable as the flop. The action's on the opponent first, and he hates the community card so much that he foregoes his option to check, and instead, I kid you not, open folds.
How do you do that? Open muck? Oh my god. That hurts. All right.
Drag that back to top. Yeah, you should have shown him like shouldn't even call. Show him fucking 9
Yeah.
In all my time playing poker, I've never seen that before. We don't get paid. It's at least always fun to get every Jiggity in the deck together for a reunion. Pick up pocket Jiggities under the gun. I raised to 30. The player on my left 3-bets to 90. This is a very strong move. Should almost never be bluffing in this spot. A lot of the time he's going to have me crushed. I call, very much hoping to drill a set. We're heads up. The flop comes 4-4 deuce with 2 hearts. probably no lead change. I check, the opponent down bets to 50. I dial my accountant's number, he confirms that I can afford this amount. I call, the turn is the 5 of clubs. I check, this time under the gun +1 bets 200. What happened to 50, dude? I like that price a lot better. The only hand that I can beat that he played this way is some sort of ace-high flush draw. I might be drawing dead to 2 outs. Again, I'm in a tough spot. I call once more, hoping that I won't have to face a river bet. The dealer puts out the 9 of clubs, the backdoor flush gets there. I check, I glance at my opponent's playbook, and the page for checking back has been ripped out. He fires for 350. Once again, I don't beat anything that my opponent is betting for value. I can conceivably beat a missed heart draw, and that's it. Luckily, my accountant is still on the phone. He says that my hand is basically face up, and 350 is too much. Kind of agree with him, but this is the same guy who advised me to invest big in Beanie Babies several years ago, so I can't fully trust him. I do what I want, even though I know before the cards are even turned over that I'm not ahead.
Nice one. Chop it up.
The player has pocket Jiggities as well. I'm relieved to split the pot. I thought it was way more likely that we were going to lose a sizable portion of my stack. Pick up pocket Jiggities in the big blind about half past midnight. Under the gun +1, takes a gander at his cards. He likes them, just not enough to raise this time. He limps in for 40. The player on his left is next to act. He raises to 200, presumably to isolate the limper. This hand is set up somewhat similarly to the pocket 10s hand when I got 4-bet jammed on for piles. Effective stacks are slightly deeper in this one, making it less likely that someone would rip it on us if I re-raise. I 3-bet to 800 to let people know what's up. Under the gun +1 gets the hint that he doesn't have the best hand. He folds. Under the gun +2 isn't quick to make a decision. A fold from him would be fine. Instead, he 4-bets to 2400. It's another awkward spot for me. Should I call this bet for 1600 more? Should I fold? Should I jam? Guys, don't get too hung up about the correct decision. There's no right way to play this hand. It doesn't matter. I call for 1600 more, knowing that almost all the flops are going to be difficult to navigate. We're heads up out of position with 5K in the middle. The dealer puts out 10-6-5 with 2 spades. Is it a good one for us? No way to really know. Maybe we're ahead of our opponent's ace-king. Maybe we're in terrible shape. I check to the pre-flop aggressor. I imagine that he'll be betting whatever 2 cards that he's got. Stack to pot ratio is just over 1. The opponent significantly down bets to 1600. We don't have a spade in our hand. There's only one great turn card for us. The board is likely only going to get worse. For that reason, I'm inclined to jam, but I'll probably only get called by overpairs or ace-king or ace-queen of spades, which is doing pretty well against our pair anyway. I'm just going to take this one street at a time and try not to worry too much about what'll happen in the future. I call, leaving myself with 47-20. We're in a pot approaching 5-figure territory. It's massive. The turn is the 7 of diamonds, putting another flush draw on the board. I check. Just maybe, the opponent will check back and give up with an ace-king type of hand. It's extremely tense. Under the gun +2 is soaking as much airtime as possible while he decides whether or not he wants to jam or see a free river card. My hand is basically face up. I'll occasionally have pocket 10s. Sometimes I'll have aces or ace-king suited, but mostly I'll have queens and jacks. The opponent is a good player who knows the types of hands that I'll have, yet he grabs a 5K flag and slowly places it in front of him. It's a bet that has me barely covered. There aren't that many combos that I'm beating. The opponent's range only consists of semi-bluffs and hands that have me drawing to 2 outs. The main thing I'm considering is how big the pot is compared to my stack. I'm getting nearly 3-1 on a call. If the opponent has an overpair to my jacks, I can live with getting stacked that way. I'll chalk it up to a cooler. I toss in a calling chip. The opponent isn't exactly overjoyed, but I still don't know if we're ahead or not.
To you. Let's see here.
The opponent has ace-king of spades. I'm thrilled to see that we got it in good, but we're not out of the woods yet. The opponent can hit 1 of 9 spades, or 6 cards that'll give him a better pair. He's going to win this 34% of the time. It's a pot of almost $18,000. It's the biggest cash game pot that I've played in a while, and I've got 100% of myself with a big decision to make. Ultimately, I'm not here to chop pots. I'm here to win.
Let's just go once. It's better for the vlog.
We're going one time for everything. We're either going to win a massive pot to be up several thousand, or we're going to get stacked. It's all coming down to one card. The river is the deuce of clubs. It makes my heart sink to my stomach for a second before I'm able to process that it's not a spade. Running it once pays off big time. It's the largest pot that I've ever won at Win. We get a full double up from a talented player. The table won't let me get away with taking down the pot without cracking some jokes.
Good call, sir.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Maybe that hand isn't so bad after all. We somehow managed to get a fantastic run out and make the maximum after being a slight underdog on the flop and a decent favorite on the turn. Feels good to get all the way out of the hole and be firmly in Profitville. We're up 7,500 during our second session of the night and over 7,000 for the day. Next we've got pocket jacks in the small blind. Under the gun plus 2 limps in. Player in middle position raises to 20. The cutoff 3 bets to 70. This guy had been 3 betting a lot in previous hands. The button cold calls the 3 bet. I'm in a precarious situation. I don't like any options. Calling and playing out of position what could be a 5 or 6 way pot with a hand that's probably best pre-flop doesn't seem quite right. Folding is too weak. 4 betting is slightly over repping my hand. If I were playing in a game that didn't have much 3 betting, then I'd fold or call. Since the cutoff has been 3 betting more than his fair share, I imagine that he's doing some of those with weaker holdings, so I go with the 4 bet and I make it 250. This is somewhat on the small side. It should look extremely strong though. If I get 5 bet, I can fold. The limper lets his cards go. The initial pre-flop raiser folds. The 3 better and the cutoff folds. The action's on the button. He's contemplating what to do. I get the sense that he's deciding between folding and calling. He's getting a good price. He's closing the action, so he calls. I imagine he has a pocket pair from 10s down to deuces, ace king or ace queen. I wish the player would have folded because now we're going to a flop and there aren't a lot of good ones for jacks. Except this one, it's jack 7 deuce with 2 hearts. Hello top set, it's been a while. I'm glad to see you here, especially after I cold 4 bet. To keep the hands that I'm beating in, which is currently all of them, I down bet to 175. The button makes the call. You'd probably call a bet of that size. With most hands that you'd call a 4 bet with pre-flop, this doesn't narrow his range down too much. You do have to be somewhat concerned about the flush draw. The turn is the 5 of hearts. It's not a great one. I'm not exactly sure what to do in this spot. I ultimately check in case the button wants to turn his hand into a bluff, or if he has ace king or ace queen hearts and hit the flush. He checks back. I'm confident that I've got the best hand. The river is the queen of clubs. I'm gonna bet big to give the illusion that I'm bluffing. I announce a bet of 600. Takes me a while to get all the chips out there. I don't have much left, so I'm happy that the button doesn't jam right away. I really would like a call. The player tossed in a chip. We have some trouble, then eventually get the cards turned over to show our set. It's good enough to win it. We're off to a great start, up almost 1,500 as a massive pot is pushed towards us. The deck has its own plan for me. I'm dealt pocket jiggities in the small blind. It's another straddle pot, and one player's gone, so it's 6-handed at the moment. The player first to act opens at 200. This is annoying because it's a larger than normal size raise, and it's coming from an early position player. The cutoff calls. I don't like any of my options. I'm certainly not folding. I'm on the fence about calling or 3 betting. 3 betting's probably slightly better. Instead, I call, which pretty much turns my hand into pocket deuces. I'm not going to feel comfortable going forward unless I hit a set. The big blind calls. The under the gun straddler in the 2 seat puts in a tiny 3 bet to 850. This is super odd. He probably should have made it closer to 1,400. Surprisingly, the initial pre-flop raiser and the cutoff both fold. I'm not going anywhere. The stack to pot ratios are going to potentially get very strange though. I call for 650 more. The big blind also calls. A lot of the time, he's going to have a small to medium pocket pair or some kind of suited connector type hand. He has a 10k stack and can really decimate mine if we happen to get into it together. He comes out ahead. I can't think of a much better time than this to drill a set. Unfortunately, we don't run quite that good. The flop is 7-4-3 rainbow. This is such an uncomfortable situation to be in since I've got something really good, but one or both players could have me beat. I check. The big blind checks, which he'd almost for sure do with sets, or he could even conceivably do this with 6-5 suited. Under the gun likes the price that he made it pre-flop. He sticks with it and bets 850 again. I don't see how I can fold to a bet that's less than a third of the pot. The problem is that while under the gun may have a hand like ace king, in fact, that's what I think is the most likely hand he'll have given his line. I'm worried if I call it could look weak, and the big blind might put in a big check raise whether he has a strong hand or not, since this board crushes his range. What's almost an equally bad scenario is if I flat and the big blind calls behind me with a hand that has equity like 8-7 suited, 7-6 suited, pocket 6s, pocket 5s, or any hand with 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw. If I call, there won't be any cards other than a jack that I'll want to see, particularly if it goes 3 ways to the turn. I feel super handcuffed. The one thing I have going for me is that I could have also smashed this flop given how I played it pre-flop. I do something a little unconventional and slide in a raise to 2,000. It's a small sizing so I can still get away from it if the big blind has a set and wants to play for a much larger amount than the under the gun straddler is capable of. If the big blind has anything other than a set, he's pretty much going to have to fold since I put it in the check raise and he still has a 3 better behind him who also put money in. If the big blind folds and the under the gun player jams for 2,400 more, I'll have to side call off. I really hope that's not what happens though. The big blind folds. I'm very relieved to see that. I have one less opponent to worry about, but I'm not out of the woods yet. I expect the under the gun player to rip it in if he has pocket aces or kings. My read on the situation is that he genuinely doesn't like getting raised, but it's only $11.50 more for him. He's getting a good price. He calls, which we've seen him do in previous hands with very little value. I still wouldn't be surprised if he has ace king or ace queen, especially if he's suited and has a backdoor draw. It's down to heads up. The turn is another 3. It's great to see the dealer keeping it low. It's now a $7,000 pot. The opponent has about 1/3 of a pot-sized bet left in his stack. There's a good chance that he has ace high, but there's also a decent chance that he has a pocket pair better than mine. If he does, I guess this is just my time to double him up. I don't see how I can get away from this. Wish me luck. If I don't win this pot, I'm going to be in a brand new, deeper hole than the one that I spent hours trying to get out of. A big part of me wishes dinner was just 15 minutes earlier because then I would have been able to avoid this quicksand situation. This will be about a $12,000 pot if I get called. A lot of time is going by for this player to make his decision. Surely if he had aces or kings, he'd call without any hesitation since he's getting almost 4-1. I also think that he would have bet more with those hands on the flop. As each second passes, I'm more convinced that he has ace high, perhaps with a heart draw, but maybe not. Not only could I have the best hand, I could be a big favorite. I just can't think of what he could possibly have that's beating me that he wouldn't have snap called me with. We already know that the 2-seat doesn't like folding. He's racking up more time in the tank than Mark Cuban. After 56 seconds goes by, the player finally makes the call. It's one of the biggest pots that I've ever played, but do we have the best hand? I think we could. I'd like some insurance though. The dealer puts out the miracle jiggity. I know that I joke with you sometimes, but not here. We make a full house in order to have what's almost certainly the best hand in a 5-figure pot.
It's a good river.
Would he get it?
Hey, did I need the river?
You needed the river.
I suppose that we might have gotten lucky, and if that's the case, I feel bad about it for multiple reasons. I'm thrilled to have won, but I just don't like getting it in as an underdog, and I know how painful it is when others get lucky against me in similar situations. This is a little odd though because the opponent doesn't seem too upset to have gotten sucked out on in such a massive pot. He's taken this better than anyone that I've ever seen take a bad beat before.
Nice catch.
Thank you.
That was a nice catch, yes.
There you go.
Hey, I have top house going into the
Your top house?
top house.
How are you tanking then?
And it's 7.
How are you tanking then when I shoved?
How was I taking it? I just planned. What do you mean? What do you want me to do? We're going to get it all in anyway, aren't we?
This is maybe the most ridiculous conversation that I've ever had after a hand. He's saying that he 3-bet small pre-flop with pocket 7s when he could have called to close the action, which I don't think that I've ever seen anyone do. He tank called the flop raise. That's pretty reasonable with top set. Then tank called the turn with the second nuts for almost a full minute in a timed game. After I shoved all in, he was getting 4-1 on a call. If what he's saying is true, then I don't feel bad about sucking out on him at all because it sounds like he was planning perhaps the most epic slow roll in the history of poker. What's way more likely is that he was behind the entire way and wanted to save face, so he made up something that made absolutely no sense. If he told me he had aces, kings, or queens, I would have been way more inclined to believe him. 3-betting pre-flop and tank calling the turn all in with top boat isn't a very credible story. I guess it doesn't matter too much anymore. The guy's been a fun person to play with aside from this incident. We'll never know for sure whether what he's saying is true or not. What's more important is that the stack is all the way up to 18,500. This is another straddle pot. DJ Mello picks up pocket queens on the button and raises to 60. I pick up pocket jacks in the small blind. This is a standard 3-bet against the button's opening range. He just happens to be at the top of it. I raise to 250. Captain Key, who I don't know much about, also picks up pocket queens. He's in the straddle and he re-raises to 540. My initial thought is that this is a perfect opportunity for him to 4-bet light. Since it's a button open and a 3-bet from the small blind, I could potentially have all kinds of light 3-bets in my range. The action's back on DJ Mello, and he's in a tough spot. Wouldn't blame him for folding queens here and getting out of the hand for only 60, rather than not having any idea where he's at against 2 opponents, with me as the 3-better, still to act behind him. He does call for 480 more though. I contemplate jamming, thinking that Captain Key could be 4-betting light, and since the button didn't 5-bet, he won't have aces or kings. The only hand in his range that beats me is pocket queens. If I shove, he may even fold that. On the other hand, it's only 290 more for me to call, and the pot is already 1,340, so I'm getting over 4.5 to 1. If I make a set, I'll have a great opportunity to double up, since I'm against 2 opponents and the pot is already huge. I call, not really knowing where I'm at, but I'm hoping to hit the flop hard. Boom. Easy game. The flop comes Jack 9-3 rainbow. A little bit of urine comes out of me. We have top set in a pot that's already over 1600, and we're against 2 opponents with overpairs. I check. The pre-flop 4-better makes a great check, realizing that it's likely one of us hasn't beat. The button figures he may have the best hand, and he shoves it in there. The graphics aren't correct, and he actually has about 1500 in the stack rather than the 3100 that it shows. I have to restrain myself from not snap calling so that I can maybe lure the under the gun player into calling behind me. I put in a chip to call, and the remaining player gets away from it and makes a great fold. With no queens left in the deck, my opponent is drawing dead to a backdoor straight draw. I table my hand right away since I have the nuts. The turn is a 5, there's no chance to lose now, and the river is an ace. We win an enormous pot of around 4,500. Our stack is over 5K. We're winning big and having a great time.
The 8th hand of day 4, with blinds at 50,000, 75,000, we're dealt pocket jacks in the big blind. The middle position player open jams for 1.2 million. It's a shove for 16 big blinds, and there are multiple other shorter stacks. The opponent has to get through 5 other players, so there's no way this is being done light as a steal. The button tanks for a long time, then he ultimately folds. The action's on me. I have the player who's all in barely covered. As soon as I look down at the Jiggities, I think to myself that it's fitting that I might either double up or bust with this particular hand. I'm never letting it go though. I snap call, we flip over our cards, and it's a race. We're up against ace-king offsuit. If we win, we'll be in great shape to make the final 6 and potentially beyond. If we lose, we'll be left with dust and will likely be eliminated in 8th. The flop comes 10-9-5 rainbow. It's safe, at least for now. We need to fade an ace or a king with only 2 more cards to come. I just want the dealer to keep it low. The turn is the queen of spades, giving me a mild heart attack because it looks too much like a king. We both pick up a straight draw. It's actually slightly better for me because the 3 remaining kings in the deck will now give me a straight, while there are only 2 jacks remaining in the deck that can give the opponent a straight. There's only 1 card to come. Please, just don't be a jack or an ace.
And river card is a 5 of clubs. Jiggies going to win this one.
I'm covered.
This is such a gigantic hand to win for multiple reasons. We're now only 1 away from the TV final table. We eliminate a player to make a pay jump from 42,200 to 54,500, and our stack increases to about 2.5 million in chips, with 3 other players extremely short.